New semester, but the same old construction noises outside my window. So hello everyone, welcome to 2017. Today was my first day of classes. It went pretty smoothly, so I figured since I have like 1.5 million videos to catch up on, today I would film for you my first wrap up of the new year. I just feel like forcing myself to read a certain amount per month was just getting a little bit too boxy for me and it was too pressuring. So this year I'm going to start doing little mini reviews slash wrap ups every 5 books that I read. So here's our first installment. I'm going to talk to you today about the first 5 books I read in 2017 and I hope you all enjoy. So let's get started. The first book that I finished in 2017 was Bridge to Terabithia by Katherine Peterson. I purchased this book while I was on vacation in California and I read it on the plane home. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of this because the movie was wildly popular. It had little baby Josh Hutcherson in it. It's about a kid named Jess who lives on a farm in the middle of rural Virginia. It's set in the 1970s or 80s. I think it might be the early 80s or late 70s. And talks about how he's sort of a loner, but then he has a new neighbor move in named Leslie and they become friends. It talks about their whole private world that they call Terabithia that they escape to because they're both sort of outcasts. I was one of the people that saw the movie before I read the book, so clearly I knew how it ended, and I'm sure a lot of you also know how it ends. But I just think that reading children's classics, especially ones that were written in like the 80s like this one, I thought it was so neat. You get references to religion and war that you never see in modern kids literature, but I thought it was extremely cool, and I really liked how the writing was. I thought it was very atmospheric, and it really got me in like the Charlotte's Web farm mood. However, I felt like the descriptions on the characters were lacking. Because I'd seen the movie, I was able to piece together like Josh Hutcherson, little cute sweetie pie, and I can't remember the girl who played Leslie, but I also remember what she looked like, so that kind of filled in some of the gaps. Personality wise, it wasn't very fleshed out, and a lot of the dialogue scenes between the characters were very brief, and it was hard to get a grasp of all the different characters just because they were all very different and you got that sense, but it never really delved deep into their minds or their actions. It just kind of skimmed the surface. And also it was kind of hard to gauge the passage of time in this book just because it was a bit of a condensed story because it is a kid's book, but this happens over several months and it was hard to reconcile that as I was reading it just because it was all very smushed together. All the scenes were very short and abridged. The point of this book, it's called Bridge to Terabithia. It's about this land that they create called Terabithia, and I feel like that in itself was very underdeveloped, which is kind of tragic because I felt like the farm scenery compared to like their magical kingdom scenery, you were never given descriptions of that. It's always just like, and then I went to milk the cow, and there's really nothing ever about Terabithia specifically. One of the things I really enjoyed about this though is that it always references how Jess has this like nervous gut, and I think there's little references to anxiety in this, which I thought was really neat. I don't know if Jess has anxiety or social anxiety, but there were several descriptions that just made me think of anxiety, and as a person with anxiety it was easy to find that and relate to it and like assume that it was anxiety just so that I could get in his head more and understand him. And I thought that part of it was really, really beautiful. And it wasn't portrayed as something like, oh, you need to man up and stop doing this. But I think the message of shyness is natural and it's okay to be scared of things every once in a while, like swimming. It's fine. And I just liked the message that it gave off, which I know kids' books are supposed to have messages, but still, I really liked this book. I did know the ending was coming, but I still cried, so I think that gave the book an extra star for me. It wasn't my favorite of all time, but it was a cute story that I remember watching as a kid, so I gave it 4 stars. The next book I read was The Reason I Jumped by Naoki Higashida. This is a non-fiction book about what it's like to live with autism because Naoki is autistic, or he's a person with autism depending on how you prefer those words being ordered. Naoki is Japanese, so this book was translated from Japanese to English by David Mitchell and his wife, and the book is told in a question and answer format where the question will pose like, why do people with autism do or experience this? And then Naoki would say, it's because of this reason. And this book was a bit groundbreaking just because Naoki is somewhat nonverbal. He can't communicate very easily, and so he was able to collaborate with this special keyboard that helped him write out everything that he was thinking, and thus this book was born. I thought this book was really interesting. I talked about this book a lot in my Cramathon wrap-up, so if you want a super in detail review of that, I can just link the timestamp down below. So I'm just gonna go into it a little bit abridged here. I like the format of this, and I liked how I was able to read about the experience of something that I've never had to be in or deal with before. I thought that was extremely interesting and just eye-opening. And also there are little bits of fiction writing that Naoki wrote interspersed between the questions, so it was really interesting to see that. However, one main downfall I have from this book is that there's a lot of criticisms in the reviews and from people who have autism that say that there might have been a little bit of fabrication or embellishment in the translation or even just the original writing of this book. Nothing has been proven, but I had to take this book with a grain of salt just because I knew some people were claiming that this seems a little bit disingenuous. I can't speak of its inaccuracies because I don't have autism and I'm not in contact with anyone who has autism. So I would like to know how you think this book is. So if you read this book, or if you know someone with autism or works with people with autism that has read this book, let me know, because I'm being cautious because I don't know if those rumors are true or not. Even if they are or are not, I really did enjoy this one and I gave it 3.5 stars. Alrighty folks, Smackdown time. I read November 9 by Colleen Hoover. Some of you might be expecting what I'm going to say because my review on Goodreads for this book has 843 likes. So let's do a little preface of my relationship with the Colleen Hoover. I've read every book by her except for her most recent one and Never Never, but pretty much any other book. I've been there. I buy her books just as guilty pleasure reads, like they're really bad, but they're really fast. However, this book is the end of my support for her. I've been able to locate several anti-feminist and abusive moments in her past books, but this book was actually disgusting. If you want to go read my entire list of things that I hated about this book, I quoted a lot of things, I pulled on a lot of different moments that happened in the text. I really don't know how to condense all of this in like a 2-minute segment for this video, so I actually highly recommend you go read that. Let's talk about what this is about first of all. So November 9 is about a girl named Fallon who was in a fire and she has disfiguring scars all over her body, and at the beginning of the book she's in a diner with her dad saying that she's moving to New York, but her dad's really upset about it because she was supposed to be an actress who's so successful in Los Angeles. Long story short, she meets a guy in that diner and they connect based on their angstiness and whatnot, and they say every year on November 9, which is the day that day was, they're gonna meet up and be a thing. I don't even know. This book went downhill so freaking fast. First of all, I love, meaning I don't love, Colleen Hoover always has to use something very offensive as a plot point. Like every single character in all of her books, I've read them, are always like so self-conscious about themselves and they need a man to make them feel better about themselves, which is fine. I mean, it's not fine, but like it's normal in a new adult book. But in this book, she actually uses disfigurement and scars as a device to further that trope, and it's so gross. And furthermore, Ben is like obsessed and fetishizes these scars. So many times throughout the text he's like forcing her to like show him her scars, which is disgusting. There's several instances in this book that make me infuriated, but I think the number one that we have to talk about is there's no consent in this book. There's 2 scenes in particular where we see no consent happening. First of all is whenever he decides that he's gonna take Fallon out for dinner. So he says, you're gonna wear this dress, quote, because if I'm paying for dinner, I get to choose at what I stare at. Is that not a characteristic of abusive boyfriends, choosing what they want their girlfriends to wear? I'm just saying. And then he proceeds to literally undress her and redress her in that dress as she shakes and cries. It's in the book. It's there. You can't refute that. But then second of all, there's a scene where she is with a different guy at a bar. Ben walks in and basically drags her from her date. She's drunk, he is sober. Side note, he corners her in a hallway and is like, why are you here with him? What are you doing? Who is he? And then he ends up like pulling her into a storage room to get all funky with her, and she says the 4-letter word stop to him. And what does he do? He keeps shoving his hand up her underwear and he says, I have the quote here, I'll read it for you. He says to her, quote, I'm trying, ask again, and kept going. She told him to stop and he kept going and said, ask again, I'm trying. That's literally rape culture. This book is maddening. I cannot believe Colleen Hoover is a published author who's had editors read this and go, yeah, that's romance. We love it. I can't stand it. This book is full of things like that where he just, literally there's a line in the book where he threatens physical violence on her if she tries to leave him. It's not cute. It's not romantic. I would give this 0 stars if I could. I'm not reading a Colleen Hoover book ever again. Don't try and tell me that her newest book is supposed to be great because it has an abuse victim who runs away from her boyfriend. All of her books are about abuse, and they're normalized in books like these. Yeah, anyway, moving on. The next book I read was a drastic improvement. I read Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo, finally. I know. If you don't know, Six of Crows is a spin-off series from the Grisha trilogy by Leigh Bardugo, which consists of Shadow and Bone, Siege and Storm, and Ruin and Rising. It's set in a world where there are people with powers, and in this book there's 6 characters who all go on these heists together that are manned by Kaz Brekker, who's just this and yeah, they're basically just a sassy group of people who go steal things and do crazy adventures to get money. And it is the bee's knees. It is the bee's ankles. It is the bee's femurs. I loved it. I knew I would love it going into it because I met hardly any people who don't like it. I ended up staying up until like 3:30 reading it, which is not unusual for me, but still. I really enjoyed all of the characters. I like some more than others. For example, Matthias can choke. I think my favorite character is definitely Inej, or Inej. I don't know how to say her name, but Inej sounds cool. She is such a little princess, and I just want to squeeze her. I love her so much. This book was just addicting. It went by really quickly. The characters were awesome. I read books like this and I think to myself, I could never craft a story that intricate. Like the way that she plans these adventures that they do in these missions that they go on, all the little loopholes and the plot twists and how they figure out what to do. It's genius. Like I could never, it's not predictable at all, which is like weird for me because I'm usually like, whatever, that's gonna happen. It doesn't. I don't get how it happens. I'm currently reading Crooked Kingdom and I'm really enjoying that too, but this is definitely going to make it to my favorites of the year, even though this was like the 3rd book I read in the year. However, I would recommend you read the original Grisha trilogy before jumping into this one because the world is established way better in that series than this one. I don't think I need to explain that I gave that one 5 stars, but yes, I loved it. I was planning on the next book I finished being Crooked Kingdom so I could just talk about them back to back, but I started a different book instead and finished it in one sitting, so I have that one to talk about instead. I don't know how this happened, but in the middle of Crooked Kingdom, I had the urge to not read Crooked Kingdom. I picked up The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway. I had this sitting on my shelf from Cramathon, and there's stuff all over the cover, oh my gosh. And I was going to read it then. This is a novella that's just over 120 pages, and the words are big, so it's not like it's gonna take me forever to read. So I figured I'm trying to get into more classics. I own so many of them that haven't read any of them, and so I just decided to give this one a whirl on a whim. And let me just tell you, every time I read classics I'm like, this is gonna be so mind-blowing, it's gonna be so deep and symbolic and amazing, and I can sense that coming from this book. Like, it's definitely not a book that you read just for surface level. There's definitely some darker, and not darker, but deeper themes to it. But I think unless I was in a class where we were discussing this, a lot of those were just lost on me and I was not really in the mood or willing to critically think about it. I don't know. Maybe that's what I have to do when I read classics, but this one I just ended up giving a 3 stars because surface level wise, I thought the writing was great. I liked the character. I thought that the conflict was actually interesting, and I can see how this whole like, this man's gotta catch a fish thing, it might sound boring from the outside, but it's actually a really stupidly relatable struggle. The way that he cataloged his feelings and how he evolved from the beginning of the book to the end of the book, I just think was fascinating. However, the story about fishing and being on a boat was a tad, I don't want to say boring because it wasn't like I was too bored to read this, but it just wasn't the most interesting. Like all the descriptions of the boats and the ropes and the everything, I just could have cared less. Also, I think this was a little bit overhyped for me because I've had so many people say this book is the best thing that ever exists. I love the writing style, it's so gorgeous, and I just thought it was okay. Being completely serious, it was just like, an okay book. I get how people love it, I get how people don't love it. I was just in the middle of all of that. And with this long video being finally over, I just want to say thank you all so much for watching. Let me know if you've read any of the books I discussed and if you liked them as well. I will hope to continue with more of these videos soon. Hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you next time. Bye!